As always, we start with reviewing the previous month's minutes. And I had looked at them before. I think they're all in order. We paid one bill. We discussed one wetlands application. And it wasn't an extensive meeting. I make a motion to accept the minutes of April 12th unless someone has some comments. Do I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
This month, we had a bunch of correspondence, lots of new wetlands applications, Goodson, Valentino, Weisenfeld, Wahid, and I thought there was one more. Some correspondence regarding, and 3 Pandian. Correspondence regarding the base and fine art properties, the final recording of those deeds, maps. And a letter regarding the White subdivision amendment. We have one bill to pay, and that's the amount of $801.56. It is for primarily work on, this is for EHA, primarily work on clarification that Matt Sherman brought to me, and I reviewed with Beth and Joe. And this is regarding a potential subdivision at 59 Nostrand Parkway. And I will discuss that with you in a couple of minutes. So as far as I'm concerned, the council was good and the money worthwhile. So I make a motion to accept the, I guess that's the April EHA invoice in $801.56. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And would work. That would be better. Cool. So then the next thing that closes out the business meeting, go to the work session. The first application we were waiting on, not the deeds, but the proof of map recording, and we have received that. We've received a PDF copy. And do we receive paper and Mylars?
Yes.
In the right amounts, like 4 and 4, something like that? Okay, awesome. So we can take that off our list of applications. It gets smaller. We're still looking for the Bloom minor, waiting for the Bloom minor subdivision final application. The CASIC application, we received the engineer's memo. I know you're gonna recuse yourself, but I don't care. You don't have to go away.
What would you prefer?
No, that's fine. Just and I don't have a copy right in front of me, but it was very straightforward. There was one note that Joe Lombardi thought should be removed, and he didn't have a copy of the Suffolk County Planning Commission's determination for town review, which was actually dates back to August 2020. So we've had it for almost 20 months. I talked to Beth about having a resolution prepared for us to vote on tonight, and she really thought it was best if we discuss the engineering memo first and then vote on it next month. So as far as I'm concerned, we can tell Card that he can proceed on getting the deeds ready and everything else he needs to with the one suggestion that Joe made, removing that one line from the map. So, so I'll ask Beth to proceed. You guys are all in agreement with that.
Just the acre averaging thing, right?
Yeah, it's not part of it. And I looked at it. We've been working on the application since 2006 or 5. So glad that it's coming to a resolution. Regarding White, we received a letter, or formally received a letter now of part of the family backing out of the application. They've paid the fees, I guess part of their agreement with the county and the town was, since the county and town did work on the previous purchase, and now that the applicants, the seller is backing out, they had to pay some fees that were pre-designated, which they've done. I know Carla White would like to continue with the sale of her 2 lots, but I have not received any correspondence from the town or county of a willingness to purchase just the 2 lots. And until I receive that, we are not going to do anything on it. I almost think at this point, if they want to pursue with those 2 lots, it's a completely new application, because well, the drawings have to change, or it's not just amending the resolution we did, it would be creating a new resolution. So it's almost starting at scratch, and I think we would need new application fees too for that. So
It's hard enough to keep track of that one. You know, without the change.
Yeah.
You know, to change it now and to.
well, the map has a parking area on it now. They're not doing that.
Yeah,
So
it'd be so.
there's all these other easements or covenants they put on it, and then we have to back those off. And so, you know, in essence, we have to pay our attorney and our engineer additional fees to review this. So I think if it comes back, we're going to ask for that full fee again, which was 14 grand or 10 grand or whatever.
I think the big thing is a new, because lawyers would love to do addendum, basically just, they want to mark up what's there because it's easier than
Yeah.
starting up. It's like, it's just confusing as heck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And we're still waiting on proof of the right-of-way access for the Robert subdivision. And I haven't asked Matt about it at all. At a certain point, I think we should take it off our application list, but I know they're working with the health department, so we'll leave it on for the time being. But if it starts dragging too much, we'll just take it off now. The new business, as I started mentioning before, I got a email from Matt Sherman asking about 59 Nostrand Parkway. And let's see,
Is that Howard?
I think so, yeah. It is, property is quite large with, I don't have a total here, but 6.5 plus 6.8, that's 11.3 plus 2.8, 12, 13, 14.1 acres. And they want to subdivide it into 3 properties. And they were asking if they could waive the parkland set aside. And because the area is AA zoned, it requires a minimum lot size of 1.8 acres, and they have 14.1, which is quite a bit over. So our code, as it's written, states that 11134.13 subdivisions lying within the Nearshore and Peninsula Overlay District must provide parkland. But 1134.16 seems to permit a parkland set aside if the lots are 200% the minimum lot size. And we did something like that with the Pandian subdivision. One of the lots that Matt is proposing, the 2 lots will be 6.5 acres and 5.8 acres, but one lot would only be 2.8 acres, kind of forced into that size by an existing house. And the 2.8 acres is not 200% of the 1.8. So I wanted clarification, since the one code said they must provide parkland, and the other one seems to permit it to be waived because of the 2%, 100% rule. I wanted clarification, and Beth came back and said, yes, the 200% rule applies, and that we would be able to set it aside to waive. The planning board has the ability to waive if they would choose the parkland. And the way the code is written, it's the average area of the lots in the subdivision meet the more than 200% minimum. So even that there's one lot that's 2.8, the fact that the others are 6.5 and 6.8 means that they are 5.27 acres each if you average them, and the minimum lot, it's bigger than the minimum 3.28 of the 200%. So in essence, she's saying that they would be able to waive the parkland. We have the right to grant that. So I'm now deferring to you guys. What do you think? Is it something you would entertain? Do you need more information to?
I would
make this?
grant it because they got such big lots anyway.
Part of, no, let me say
Sure,
one
sure.
thing. Part of the waiver is if we accept this, they have to put into their deeds that the lots cannot be further subdivided. They're almost shooting themselves in the foot from
Yeah.
creating multiple lots.
Mm.
They, now, I don't know if this figures into it at all. They also own that huge piece of land across the street.
You know, I
don't know if
looked that up. I always was under that impression that they own that, but it seems to be under someone else's name.
It may well, it's this, I believe it's effectively the same. It's the same family, certainly. I don't know.
And Matt indicated it's the son who was driving the subdivision.
Right. I actually spoke to Trudy Nay Fowler. I like her last name now. But she apparently it's a family division. It's going to grandchildren and children. But I believe it's the same Fowler family that own that huge piece of land
On the inside.
that goes all the way from Winnipeg, the other side of the road, all the way down to Belvedere.
Yeah,
I think
for Belvedere, and it says it's owned by William U. Becker. according to Jim.
that's the same thing. It's a huge piece of land. I don't know if
It's
that in any way figures into this.
45 acres.
45.
No, that's not, we're talking about the waterfront parcel.
Yes, I know. I'm saying.
No, it was,
I'm sorry. Yeah, yeah.
I'm just wondering if there's,
So-
I wasn't sure what the ownership was.
so the fact that they're not going to be able to subdivide any further makes me think, and they have so much land, I think I would support waiving the parking.
Mhm.
Is that something you guys would support too, or?
Normally in the parking, there's like you get isn't there revenue also from the park?
It's in the center of the island, there's an option to, instead of providing the 10% parkland, to provide, or even on near shore, provide another piece of land or equivalent money that add for another piece of land. So they left those options. We typically allow the waiving of parkland for most inland subdivisions anyway. We've been doing that. So
I mean, I was just wondering if maybe they would, this is maybe presumptuous, but if they would consider marking out some land across the street in the center of parkland.
they would have to do another subdivision of that then.
Yeah.
Mhm. The only thing cool would be if there were another town landing there. Remember the fast we lost one on Nostrand Parkway further to the south.
We lost it because the town chose never to fight it. And it's still, that was the Schulteis
Mhm.
driveway, which was a town landing. And they just gardened it and made it look their own.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
there's no actual purpose of the town that, but it was like a Silver Beach. That was, it was that, it wasn't town owned.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So it was more of a homeowners association.
Yeah, I was just asking Andy Reeve about it, and he's today, actually. And he said that it was actually not, I had always heard that it was a town land. Yeah, he said no,
It wasn't technically owned by the town.
Mhm.
it was more of an agreement.
It was a homeowners.
I can't imagine that the applicant would want to create a town landing where the average blow goes down there and disrupts their privacy.
Mhm.
The other option was that we force them to creating that 10% parkland, which they could turn into, it becomes, it just has to be adjacent to all the properties. It could be as much as for the use of the three properties that are developed and no one else. If the town takes it over, then it's open to anyone to use. But if it's just designated as parkland for and I guess you would have to form a homeowners association for that purpose, it would be just for the people's use who are adjacent to it.
Something just occurred to me, I mean, and again, I'm just thinking of what Marcus was saying about the town limit. What if there's that, they own all the way, the Fowler property goes all the way up to Porthwick, where there's that funny
Yeah.
little road.
Right. That's a private road, I think.
Yeah. What if there was a way of putting it in between,
Mm.
if you having a town landing?
It's probably arguably so close to Kissing Rock, that
Yeah.
don't really need one. But the other thing is, like they've done in other subdivisions, the planning board in the past has, like, could say, can the first 100 feet from the road be undisturbed? So when you drive down the road, you have that sense that it still feels like a woods. Like they did this on Cobbett's Lane, like where
Yeah,
Vegetative buffer.
the vegetative buffer and the
we've talked about that one in the past.
Yeah, and that was all it's interesting. I was just looking at that again, and actually something's come up recently with that where there was some confusion trying to figure out what the setbacks were on that property. On the southeast side of the corner where Primrose hits.
Yeah, but
Commons.
that's a different subdivision.
Yeah, well, there's several, but the interesting thing there is that the road, the town owns a huge wide swath of road, and a lot of what people
You
thought
mean
was
Primrose?
in front of Primrose, that vegetative buffer that
To the
everybody
right or
thought.
to the right, right?
If you're heading east, it's to the south. Yeah, it's the corner of Primrose and Cobbett's that's closest to the water.
Oh,
the
really?
east side.
But that's a separate subdivision.
It is, and it's a whole thing, there are a bunch of separate subdivisions. But generally, some of those vegetative buffers were put in by the town. And some of them were as part of the subdivision, but some were put in by the homeowners association. And some of them, the town has jurisdiction, gets to enforce. And some of them, the homeowners association is supposed to enforce, and they no longer enforce them because everybody's going.
Well, I think we're also a little bit of the horse before the cart here, because we don't have an application.
Right.
But I just wanted to say what has come up. I think that they're preserving so much land that I'd be comfortable without putting extra
Yeah.
things on them, but we could talk to them about extending their front yard setback from AA's 50 to 100. But I just think it would be, instead of seeing 14, say 6 houses there, 5 houses, if we're seeing only 3, I think that's a big plus.
Yeah, it's not the same as a subdivision like Dickerson Road and that whole area where you've got lots of little houses cheek to jowl. And you would want some parkland
Parkland,
and
right.
ameliorates
Right.
that. I mean, this is basically, gonna look like parkland.
All right, so moving on.
Did you get a chart with that, or did you get a survey with that?
No, I got just a verbal discussion. I'll share that with you guys if you want a copy of what the back and forth
Yeah.
was.
No, I
It's
think,
just, the application's not there
I
yet.
I
so-
think, I think the thing is like, we would certainly, I think we'd certainly consider it, and it's certainly within our space to be able to decide if we want to.
Yeah.
And I think we're leaning toward it unless we discover something else in the process, right?
I think one of the family members actually, in other words, I think there's that piece of land too, and then there's, I could be wrong with this, and then there's Putignano. And then
Joey put-
yeah, and I think then the next property down on the other side of Putignano may be owned by the same family. So in other words, they own, I could be wrong about it.
It used to be, that was the Weber house, I believe. Actually, my mom took care of it.
I thought it was bought by a Becker.
I'm not sure. But that was the same family. Weber the Becker. As I remember, yeah.
Okay, so moving on to wetlands, we've already submitted Goodson, and I know Meg has seen our report. There has been some continued conversation about that, and I think as of yesterday, Marcus wrote an email, Julia wrote an email, they're both in favor of removing most of the, or all the violations. I think I would like to, I don't want to necessarily be that draconian, but I totally understand your point of view, of setting a precedent that some wealthy
Right.
person will like, oh, we'll just build it and then file for the stuff later. But the fact that this was done, three owners removed does come to play a little bit. I don't want to just see some planting. I've heard word that he's now willing to do an IA system. But I think that's not enough. I personally would like to see the gazebo out, and partly because that was, we've subsequently learned, was something that was built in 2008. They got a permit for it in 2016 under the premise of using their 100 square foot exclusion, but it was already built. And then when everyone got it on the survey, it showed it was built, beyond the DEC regs. The attorney was able to get the DEC to sign off and just say, yes, it was wrong, but slap down the hand. But I think this needs more than this. I think it needs to be.
Fine. Yeah, and
That's the first thing I said when I looked at it. It's kind of dilapidated too, and, it's, and then they have, in my view, they have another 100 feet that they can.
Yeah, that's still a debate between the building department and the way I think we're kind of seeing that 100%, 100 square feet. It's that, you're allowed to remove and rebuild, but that hasn't been clarified by Stephen Kiley. Stephen is working on it, per
Yeah,
my understanding.
Bob, prior to Steve, sent me an email thinking that it could be.
And I have an email from Chris Tehan who reached out to Bob Stefano about it. And he likewise said it's a change in policy. After I pressed him on it, that it would be, you remove it, you can rebuild it. It's not a one and done. And I think, and I keep coming to say, I think the building department's view that it's a one-time use. It's not one time, it's one time per property since the code went in effect. But it's not just a once and you're done. You're allowed every property since that is allowed to add up to 100 square feet without a permit. Subsequent to 2001 was August or July 2001 code adoption.
yeah, and I don't have an opinion. In other words, it's not I just want someone to clarify.
Yeah, I think.
Because it's certainly not been the policy. Mary and Billy, and Chris up until just recently were like, nope, you get one shot at it.
Mary used to consider swimming pool patios to have to meet the swimming pool setback. And now swimming pool patios are seen as an accessory and don't have to comply with the swimming pool setback.
Yes, that was for a specific reason, which in a funny way is the opposite of what's happening here, which is that it was extremely hard to parse that out and regulate because you would have you could have some you could have some landscape element that was hundreds of feet away from the main house, but it was connected by a walkway or something. And Mary used to count, that whole thing as a primary setback. And it was a nightmare. So in other words, in this case, it's the other way around. In this case, having to keep track of that 100-foot, one-time setback and how much of it's been used and how much they have
I get
left,
I
that
get
would be a nightmare
I
for us.
get
But
that.
we do it. We just need someone to tell us what the,
It's
What
poorly,
they
it's
took.
kind of poorly written because it talks about cumulative, but they mean cumulative like between multiple places. Or it's like, just, I think Mr. Kylie should.
So reading, I've sat with Stephen and he said it's on the list and of his oodles and oodles of stuff. So
The laws.
So to summarize, right now, the planning board's position is IA system and gazebo gone as a minimum.
That's the recommendation.
Some additional plantings, but plantings, they really have to be in a way defined or reasonable, because does the property really pitch in that direction a lot? Or is the lawn going to absorb? So I think plantings are, and the dry wells, put the house dry wells. So those three items, I think, are what we're pushing for.
I was thinking also, what about as the property slopes towards the water? What about like a gentle swale that has a French drain under it that you can't see, comes sloping across the property and then piped to the front of the property? Where's that big swell where the garden is? You just have it totally gravity fed, and then that way you have like 90% of the runoff.
I think if this was a new project, it'd be one thing, but to have to go tear up the lawn and then put in silt fencing for this and then wait till everything grows in and matures. I think we would potentially do more damage putting that in at this point than just leaving it alone. Moving the gazebo and the deck underneath it, so it just becomes straight dock walkway, not a sitting place, is doesn't tax the ground. But even in our letter, I pointed out, they didn't say what they're going to plant or what they were offering, and if it is, are we just going to dig holes and put new plants in, or are they going to rip out all the grass?
you would need to see,
Real plan.
you'd need to see a very specific planning, landscape plan for that, because otherwise it's, it's just a nightmare, when you, in terms of enforcement, how do you,
I remember going to look at Badley, and they're the first driveway on the right
Yeah.
after South Ferry. So, one of my, and we went to, I think maybe I went with you, or I don't know, I went with John Kerr. And they had gotten a wetlands permit. They were supposed to put in a buffer. They had like one plant every 5 foot on center with some mulch around it. And I'm like, this hardly solves anything. And and with buffers, I mean, is the building department going to go check on it every year? Or is it going to be mowed down after they get their CO? So again, with the buffer, I'm struggling with this concept, unless it really does have a steep property and it's prudent.
are there problems with erosion on Goodson on that slope?
I
or-
didn't see any.
I think everything is stabilized.
Yeah,
And I talked to Stephen Kiley about this a little bit, and he was like, if a building has if a property has a bulkhead also being up off the lawn a little bit, stops water from flowing. So if the property is bulkheaded, why would we even consider putting it up? Because the bulkhead's acting as the buffer. That's just, it was his point and how other towns handle it.
I mean, it depends on the slope. I mean, if it's sloped right above it, it goes right over it. I've seen some, like an excellent example is the old one core property on the way to Silver Beach. You look at that, it's a gentle swale inside into the property, so gentle, and been there through so many storms and not seen one bit of pool. You know, it's just, and there's no runoff. There's a 0% runoff. It comes back in, goes to the swale, drains in, and recharges the aquifer.
That's probably very much sandy soil there.
And good rains.
I'm sure it's, you know,
Yeah, I don't know what's over on Margaret's Lane. Every different part of the island has different soil. I mean, your dad knows the best. I've hit clay in the heights like I couldn't believe, you know, I just couldn't believe there were these giant clay deposits, all the stuff that you could make pots out of. I mean,
I think at some point, it's funny because up on the hill on Cobbetts, on the south side, that there's an A-frame house that's just been renovated. They were digging up there and they got bogged up at the top of the hill. And my theory is that people were constantly trying to get rid of boggy soil that they were scraping out of one place, and they dumped a bunch of it up there. You know, which is a nightmare as far as a foundation goes, or, you know, as far as, and so, you know, it's funny, you never know.
I think like most waterfront properties, you'll find, you dig down, you'll get sand.
most of my projects hit sand. Shelter Island's very sandy.
Pandian, there's sections of Pandian that are
There's
nightmare.
also refrigerators and cars out there too,
Yeah.
so, yeah, it's all fill.
It's filled in.
I was at, I shouldn't, but to me, it's interesting. I was at a friend who is a Bistrian, and he had pictures of the dunes right in front of Calvin Klein's house in the 50s. And they were burying cars to hold the sand. And there was just a line of cars that they were covering.
Cadillacs like pointing up. in the
Oh,
air.
yeah, pretty much, yeah. It looked like ant farm. Yeah, no, it was wild though. It's like, it was one of those things that you were like, wow, if they knew what was here, they would. And he said they dug them out a few years recently, 70 years later, and everything was gone except the chrome bumpers were still intact.
Wow, that's strange.
Yeah. They had a better brand of chrome than they have now.
All right, so we're done with Goodson, hopefully for a long time. 42 Garner's Bay, which is the old Michael Coles property. It's not, a public hearing has not been set, but we have a draft wetlands report in front of us. This is both a wetlands and a special permit for a 9,700 square foot house. So I read through it. I haven't fine tuned. I think it's pretty good. I think since we're doing both a wetlands report and a special permit, we should focus the reports on that, on each case, and write them differently. So I understand that the applications were not completed fully to the letter of what we request. Having said so, on the wetlands, I don't know that we need bedroom counts for the wetlands. And it just seems the only thing they're doing is removing some structures within the wetlands and then making everything compliant. One thing I have been talking to Stephen about is for cases just like this, why should a homeowner have to go through this type of application, all the supporting materials, when they're just doing the right thing? I think it could be done administratively, put some wire back silt fencing back up. If we need to check that, we check it. The product comes out, we look for some ground restoration, call it a day. When they're doing the right thing, I don't think we should be torturing someone.
Right, I agree.
So I think maybe, and I'm not writing this one, it's up to you guys, but maybe if you let me just take a poke at it and just cut some stuff out. And then when you do the special permit, start with this And that's where you ask for, because that's where the bedroom count, bathroom
Yeah,
count,
yeah, yeah,
where
yeah.
all that
Yeah.
stuff really comes to
I think we
play.
were doing that mainly because we didn't have the other, that, so it's.
Yeah, I mean, I had a conversation with a couple of board members who felt that if it's on the application. And I also had a conversation with Matt Sherman about it. Because I was looking for guidance, because this is the first time I've done these, reviews for completeness. My feeling is if it's on the application, why not just answer the question?
Yeah,
And I think to some extent, it could be argued that it is part of the whole holistic view of the property. If you're adding a house that's 11 bedrooms, it's different than if you're doing a house that's 5 in terms of the overall impact on the wetlands, even though it's not in that regulated area.
well,
I don't know,
if you're-
I'm
if
up
you're
to,
applying for
I'm
the
open to
special-
suggestion.
permit, you're basically using the same application. It should be able to cut and paste it, and I think their attorneys being a little catty, as you suggested, pointed out, that they're just don't want to answer all the information. We should ask for all the information. But again, just talking about future, where we're just removing stuff out of the wetlands.
Yeah, no, in this case, I don't think it,
I don't,
it's
think-
just, I guess what I'm looking for is, it'd be a lot easier if it were just consistent. If
yes,
they ask the question on the thing, put it on.
Yeah.
If they ask the question, put it on. That way we're not, that way there's consistency, people know what to expect, and we don't have to parse it out every single time, because it's a huge waste of everybody's time if we have to negotiate over every application. I think actually it's interesting, that the deeds and covenants are required on the special permit application, but they're not required on the wetlands. Whereas it can be significant on the wetlands because there might be an easement, there might be something like the, right of way to the beach or something. I just feel like maybe it's time to tidy up the applications.
It sounds like the required.
So they're, and be
Information.
clear about it, like just, if
well, I still hear that the town board was gonna transfer wetland applications to us. I think one of the first, if that happens, one of the first things we could do
Yeah.
is just review the application and modify it if we
Mhm.
feel need be. But I just wanted to make that one point about.
no, I agree generally. I just feel like so we don't have to litigate every single application.
Yep,
Be clear about what's required, even if it seems like it's not relevant. It may or may not be relevant in the eyes of the people reviewing it. If the question's asked, put it on the application.
Wahid Ali, so you're still working on the special permit, and we're still waiting for information back from Bennett, John Bennett. We haven't received anything.
I asked for all those when I did the
I saw
review
the email.
at the same time,
A
and
month ago.
we haven't heard
So,
back from them.
so it's up to them, and eventually the homeowner will ask what's going on, and they'll reach out to us, and you'll say, well, we asked for this additional information. We're not moving until you give it to us. Wahid Ali, that's been assigned to Marcus and Julia. You go look at it next week. Weisenfeld, that's David and Reed. You guys have to go.
With schedules. Yeah.
You have to schedule it.
We'll talk about it, maybe.
David and I went to look at Valentino. That was very straightforward. It really was minimal. It's a renovation of an existing structure within, mostly in the adjacent regulated area. There's a very small section that's in the vegetative buffer that's under 100 square feet, so that's easily their exemption.
That was also put in on permit.
Yes, I know that. So, I mean, if the building department wants to charge them fines, they're 5 times fee for that, that's.
Well, it's again, the same thing we just had with Goodson.
Right, but it's 100 square feet, it's not 500 or 600 or 800 square feet. No, that's kind of where. And we're talking about wood deck with weak poles. Now, their deck has been is expanded and is not so open. I'd like to see the gaps, and it looks like the board should be replaced, reset with, I usually do 3/8 inch, but gaps, or at least 1/4 inch. Just so the water goes through and it perks into the ground underneath the deck. I mean, I'm kind of surprised that in the past, the town had reviewed these wood decks as impermeable surfaces when they're so much more permeable than a patio set in sand. And so if you have the gaps, the water drips down, it percolates over a large surface. And that's what we have here. They also need the dry wells. But otherwise, I think it was a straightforward one.
Yeah, they're doing an accessory unit, that it's straightforward.
Renovation of the existing house and an accessory structure. So we're ready to write that one. And then the last one, and I'm not going to try to pronounce that. 3 Pandian Road. Marcus and Julia are going to look at that.
Yeah, it's a special permit for an oversized house.
Yeah.
There's nothing being done in the wetlands. It's 9,000 something square feet, a little over, but it's a 3.2 acre lot, so they've got a lot of land there. I think I was here for the end of Pandion, not the beginning, but I think they designed it for larger houses, bigger lots, larger houses. They could have went for, done 21, 1 acre.
26 or 21,
Yeah,
whatever it
something like
was.
So
Right.
that's,
I think it's,
they got 3 cars going for it.
and the town board is yet to not permit a large house. They just, like the wetlands, want to review it. You know,
It's interesting, the house next door, which is ultimately equally as large,
Where's this?
one pan. They got around the need for a special permit by having a huge barn that's kind of rec space, but it's seasonal. It's not heated. It's finished, but it's not heated, so therefore it doesn't count as square foot living. I think it and it's got beds in an upstairs area, but it's not living space.
With this 3 Pandion, there was once, the monastery kitchen and cafeteria there. That was like 20 feet from the bulkhead, as I remember, and they could have argued that, well, we could have gone that close up, but they're not doing anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think it sounds.
So probably pretty straightforward.
straightforward. Going back to the Wahid Ali, I don't know if it helps you, but we did a review 4 or 5 years ago was similar, was just dealing with plantings. It was in Hay Beach. It's that black flat house. I can't remember. Adler and his Doonan and Adler. And they just wanted to create some sand dunes in their yard. And so I send that
That's
to
what
you.
the other one, Wahid Ali, yeah.
All he wants to do is some sand dunes. Or something.
Yeah, I've never done that before, but they did that at 34 Little Ram Island Oaks. There was another big house there, but they made these dunes, and I kind of, like them because they are like sort of like swales that collect the water and like limit the amount that goes over the bulkhead.
I don't think he told the DEC in the town he wasn't going to bring in any fill on his initial applications. He brought in and pumped out all this fill from when they dredged
34, oh, a little,
Little Oaks.
Oh, 34, yeah.
And
well, they got
some-
fined for that.
so he still pays a little fine.
Did they, or because
The Costello, the dredger did, from what I understand, because
Because Coles and
Relier,
Slayton, Relier and Slayton, they all got a stop work order. And they were all part of that dredge.
they were dredging, yeah, they were
and they
dredging
dumped
that.
all the dredgings on Relier's.
Well, Relier's and
And-
Little Oaks.
Yeah,
Because
I
of
actually went
planning.
down there and when I was driving across the causeway, and saw it, and went driving, what's going on? And they told me that they had DEC permits to do it. And then I looked into it and they had some sort of a permit for dredging.
But not for dumping the spoils.
Well, what they told me at the time was that they were just staging them.
Yeah.
But then I don't know whatever happened,
Only for 50 to 60. Just staging.
And I don't know, Relier ever get a chance to put in the lawn? Because I was working on for Coles next door. And
Yeah, I don't
my
know.
God, that stuff stank.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was really.
like dead clams.
Yeah. We did. That's all I had for tonight. Does anyone have anything else for us?
Somebody online. I don't know if it's-
Pam Demarest.
Hello, Pam. Do you have anything for us tonight?
No, gentlemen, that's fine. I was just listening in to see what's going on in town and what's on your agenda. But thanks.
Okay,
Thanks for
thank you. You're always welcome. Okay, that's it.